welcome to the Beauties and Beasties podcast with Alex and Sean.
Hey, how we doing?
Hey, dude. Well, I've got myself a pair of earphones this week, so I'm hoping that this helps with the noise. I'm not too bad. Can I apologise for my lateness? I run late anyways, and then there was a massive traffic diversion, so that's why I was.
Sean, I hasten to tell that nobody knew you were late until you said you were late. You could have absolutely just owned that. But there we go. Now, I have to say, we've tried to get around the whole echoing thing. I have bought myself a very nice, you can just about see it here, condenser microphone. So I'm going to try my level best to sound as much like a Radio 2 presenter today as I possibly can. I'm going to try and really eke out some, vocabulary that I would never use, just to be like, yes, diphenocum. Just really weird it out like that. So there we go. Anyhow, Sean, how's your week been?
Very, very good. We have. Can you hear us? Okay. Nod.
I can hear you. We can hear you.
Yeah, you can. It's been okay. It's been very good. We've got a bit done. It doesn't look like it here, but this is the last area that we need to get cleaned. We've done the workshop downstairs. We've done the container. We've done the trailers. And when I say we, I must thank the lads. They've done it. They've done a brilliant job. And we've had a few little jobs on the go, which have sort of come okay. So I can't complain this week. How's your week been, Alex?
It's been good. I spent the first half of this week in Belfast doing some level 2 training, which is always a joy. Belfast is a lovely place. I've been to it a couple of times now. Did some work last year for the Northern Ireland Transport Ministry, which was exciting and an eye-opener. I think I've spoken about this on here before. But I think the probably most recent news was as of a couple of hours ago. Very sadly got information back that I didn't. Those who know, sorry, let's backtrack a little bit. I actually threw my hat in the ring for the crew chairman's role, and that was end of last year. Put my name in the ring, but very sadly today got a bit of news back saying that I hadn't been accepted. So hardly a surprise, but at the same time, a little bit gutting because if you apply for something, you want to get it, don't you? At the end of the day, but no, sadly it wasn't to be.
So the first thing is I'm gutted for you for obvious reasons. However, that being said, I think this podcast should be for pushing us forward, not backwards, and maybe this is a fantastic opportunity. Matthew last week said he would love to hear from someone from crew. I would love to hear from someone from crew, and if anyone puts in the comments whether they would like to have a crew representative on here, that might help us get them on. And I think, wouldn't it be lovely to get whoever gets the new chairperson on to talk about where they want to go with it, how they're going to get there, and what their vision for crew is moving forward. I would love to think that that would stop a lot of the negativity towards it, because then at least people would understand the direction they're taking.
Absolutely. I think crew does a lot of good work. I'm not going to, beat around the issue. I think the crew does a fantastic job at what it tries to do. It's got a mammoth task. It's got a huge amount ahead and behind it. But one of their biggest shortcomings, in my opinion, and one of the things that I wanted to address with the crew role, was to have a little bit more transparency in how and why decisions were made, because it very much feels, I think, to a lot of people on the outside that these decisions are made almost unanimously, and it is for our own good and for the betterment of the pest control community. And actually, probably a lot of the times it is. The problem being is we don't understand quite how the process came about to get us there. And so there's always a little bit of reticence or a little bit of skepticism that follows these statements, which is not good at the end of the day. So there we have it. But hey ho, there we go. So definitely, guys on there, let us know if you did, and also a little bit of sweepstakes. Who do you think it is?
Yeah. Put in your comments who you think's going to get it and whether you would like to see them on.
Yeah, absolutely. And even if they don't get it, we'll get them on anyway and see what they think about the whole thing. But tonight we have a very special guest with us. Actually, we've got the third of our M&D community members to join us on the podcast. We have a lovely lady from Pelsis called Sophie, who's going to talk to us about all things fly and EFK related, which is going to be great. Those who are especially coming into spring eventually, and then summer when we're all going to start having issues with flies. This is actually about the best time to do it because it gives you a little bit of time to get your head around it, have a look, understand what it's about, so you are ready come the time.
Come on then, let's get her in.
Go on then. Let's get her. Are you ready, Sophie? Here we go.
Hello.
Hello.
Good evening. Do you know what? You've exactly read my mind about fly killers and flies. I thought, oh, it's January, it's still a bit early, but yeah, it's about to be fly season. Let's talk about flies.
It makes perfect sense, doesn't it? Because there's no good sort of like talking about flies when you're already, up to your eyeballs in them. It'll be like talking about wasps when everyone else is
already they're already out dealing with them.
They're dealing with them. So, oh no, Sophie, excellent to see you. And for those who don't know, tell us a little bit about yourself.
Well, okay, yeah, happy to do so. Thanks for having me on. It's a great opportunity. I'd love to talk about pests at any point, so it's great to actually talk about those who are passionate enough to listen in at 7 o'clock in the evening. It's great to have that kind of platform. So, a little bit about me. I love all things insect, I'd say. Anything six-legged is my kind of thing. The more it crawls, the more it flies, the more exciting I find. So I've always loved insects, I suppose. Even I didn't realize until how perfect pest management was. Until when I look back and I was looking after stick insects as a child, looking after mice and rats as pets. And then I got really interested in parasites, as you do.
Hang on. We're going to have to put a pin in that. We're going to have to just break in right now. What?
Parasites like tapeworms, malaria, sleeping sickness, onchocerciasis. I went back to uni and did like a whole more education on that, and then I realized it's not about just the parasites; it's the things that transmit them. So the flies, the vectors of these parasites, which is where I found it most fascinating. Yeah.
See, the thing that why my ears pricked up at this, and this is something that probably some people do know, but many don't. My old man, he has a doctorate, and his doctorate is actually in tropical medicine and parasitology.
Oh.
So actually, as I grew up, when I was, he'd drive me to school as, a wee child. Instead of sort of like talking about the football or talking about any of these other things, no, he would give me a little science lecture on the topic closest to his heart, which was entomology and parasitology. So I remember driving to school and him giving me a detailed lecture on Mycophlanaria, which is the heartworm that resides in dogs. And loads of the books around my house growing up were all, most people have books about art and the rest of it. No, he'd have just medical textbooks with the most awful
images. Yeah. The worse the better, though, sometimes.
Yeah, as a child, it was morbid curiosity, looking at this, being like, you'd pick a page at random and be like, what awful bullshit's here today?
Yeah. I've got a great book. You probably got it as well, but it's like Medical Entomology by Burgess, and it's great. I still read it just for fun sometimes. But yeah,
that is a telling window into your psyche there. Absolutely. Oh,
but yeah, and that relationship between them is it's amazing how these relationships have developed. But almost everything's got a parasite because that's how biology works. That's always something to take advantage of something else. But because insects are so fast growing, you get like these really interesting complex relationships building up as well.
Oh, lovely. Well, and in case in point, there's even certain projects going on in the UK and definitely some products out in the States which utilizes this parasite, and especially with insects, a lot of these parasites are really specific, genus specific, down to some even that are species specific. So you have like certain species of fungus, for example, that they use to control bed bugs out in the States.
Yeah. You can also get like fungus for cockroaches as well, but yeah, there's like you can find them in the wild, and then you have to like try and figure out, does it control your pest cockroach, or how do you grow that to actually then like produce enough of it to release into the environment? That's the hardest bit of actually like taking that resource and making it into something that you can actually give out again, replicate. Yeah.
And we've all seen The Last of Us, haven't we? It's one small step between us all growing oyster mushrooms out the top of our forehead and trying to chew each other's necks off.
Yeah.
Sorry, it's a long shot. But at the same time, every time I see these horrible sort of like Terminator funguses, you sit there and you think,
it's about to someday maybe.
Someday, this is how the world ends, not with a bang, but with a bit of creeping mycelium.
Yeah.
So there we go. No, I completely cut you off there. But I mean, am I right in saying that you were previously a rent-a-kill?
Yes.
Weren't you?
So
yeah,
that's what happened. I did that. Did my university, did my masters, and I thought, I better get a job. And I realized I liked working with the insects, and I happened to be lucky enough that I got a job with Rent-a-Kill in the entomology department. They didn't come up very often, and I was so incredibly lucky that I was at the right time. So yeah, box of cockroaches, bed bugs, houseflies, beetles, moths, whatever. I must admit, the first time I lifted off the lid of the American cockroach box and they all started running around like crazy, it was a bit like, whoa. But loved it, absolutely loved it. I think at one point I could catch a cockroach every few seconds with a pair of tweezers for lab experiments. You get really involved with it, and very just like it's a whole different world, I suppose. But yeah, it's great fun.
It's all right. You can nerd out about bugs. It's fine. I mean, I love bugs. Sean's just sat there sort of like,
sorry.
bugs are not his thing. I did a couple of podcasts ago, we did a tour, didn't we, Sean, of my labs where I showed you around all the bugs, and just remind us what your reaction of that was.
I just think it's weird that anybody would want to keep a spider that could bite you that has no like nothing nice about it, doesn't it? It's not like you can keep a dog and the odd one will bite, like every single one will bite. You keep it in a tub, you have to feed it horrible things. I just don't get it. Like spiders, like why anyone would want to keep insects is beyond me. I can't lie to you. I think it's proper weird, but it takes all sorts to make the world go around, doesn't it? And a lot of people think I'm weird, so that's fine. Don't mind.
So I'm going to jump in before Sophie here, and I'm going to explain why I absolutely find bugs fascinating. And then, Sophie, I'm going to ask you the same. So you've got this long to think about that. But to me, if you have a look at like the animal kingdom and you have a look at, I find birds tremendously boring because all birds are basically different colors of the same animal. And then even most mammals are sort of like just different sizes and shapes, and it's their behavior that allows them to sort of like operate in niches. But insects, if they need to do something special, they will literally grow a protuberance the side of their head. If they need to sort of like, if they need to do something, they will change, to within a certain limit, like the entire composition of their body. They'll go to different sizes, different shapes. They will change the shape of their exoskeleton to fit into that scenario. The actual diversity in insects is phenomenal, and I find that fascinating. Where other animals have to change their behavior, insects are just like, screw it, if I want to fit into that gap, I'm going to make myself exactly the shape of that gap. It's crazy. So yeah.
No, I completely agree. I like to use the word entomologist for myself, but actually, I know a very small percentage about all of the insects in the world, because there's just so many, and you can get some massive ones and like really brightly colored ones. But I just like to watch the flower beetles sometimes, just crawl up the same bit of paper over and over. I love the weevils. I just find them really fascinating just to watch and like just observe what they do. And sometimes I think, how the hell are you a pest if you can't climb that little bit of like this like little bit of cardboard? But it's amazing how well they survive and how they will be here after we have long gone. They will be the ruling part of the world, I'm convinced.
Absolutely. I mean, I think in one of good old David Attenborough's documentaries. It's something like there's 8 kilos of invertebrate life on the planet to every 1 kilo of vertebrates. They outnumber us, literally, metaphorically, and physically as well. So there we go. Go on, Sophie. What's your favorite bug? Pest and non-pest.
You can't pick a favorite one because there's so many good ones.
Yeah.
I do really like something called a rosy maple moth, but it's not a pest just because of the name, the colors. If you Google it, it's like this lovely yellowy pink color. Favorite pest? Oh, I do quite like an American cockroach. Just something about, because I think that it's because they're one of the biggest pest insects, if not the biggest. There's not much that will beat them, and they're just so good and like at surviving. If you see them feeding on something, it's amazing how the mouth moves as well. That I find it really fascinating that way.
Oh, that's excellent. And they can run on 2 legs. I don't know if you've ever seen that.
Yeah, they go up on the back legs, and they're kind of like mice in some ways, that they stick to the perimeter of a room, and they have that antenna touching a wall, and they run around the outside of things.
They run around the outside. I'll tell you of my favourite scientific study before I let Sean jump in with some questions of his own, because I'm sure he's got plenty. But there was a study done where they were measuring the fact that insects, they have a brain. We use the term brain loosely. It's a group of ganglia, group of nerve cells clustered together. But also they have series of clusters going all the way down their body as well. Especially top of each leg, top of each appendage will have its own ganglion cluster. And they did a study where they're trying to figure out that if an insect reacts, does that reaction come from the primary ganglia in the brain, or actually are all the ganglion in the legs capable of making like an autonomous decision as to whether or not to right that insect? And in the first study that they did, they tried to blow the insect over with a brush of air, and then suddenly realized that actually no, you're measuring a whole load of other variables there, and it obviously is going to be a conscious decision. So what they ended up doing to knock the insects off balance with actually no pre-warning whatsoever is they glued, and wait for it, tiny cannons to the backs of the cockroaches. So of course when the cannon fired, Newtonian physics said if you've got a couple of grams going this way, then the cockroach is going to go that way. And so that's it. The whole study was them gluing tiny cannons to the backs of cockroaches, which I think is a phenomenal, use of your time and government money.
Yeah, that's a great way to spend a grant. Yeah.
Okay, imagine the research proposal to that. I want to glue cannons to cockroaches. Why? I want to see if their legs think. Right. There's something. Is everything all right at home?
Yeah. Don't ask too many questions. Just sign it off. Yeah, off you go.
Exactly that. Yeah. This will be brilliant. People will be talking about it for years. So there we go.
Yeah.
Anyway, I think I've got enthusiastic about bugs nearly enough. So Sean, come on, help me out.
Yeah, to be fair, mate, I don't mind you talking about bugs flat out, because let us know if this is echoing a little bit, because I'm trying to sort out. Not. It's okay. Yeah, obviously bugs are a little bit niche, so there's not many people get into bugs in the way that you used to have, and also there's not many women in pest control, and probably maybe there'll be a few in bugs, I guess. But how did you, or what was it from, or was it an early age thing that wanted to get you into bugs, or what was the spark that started the whole bug journey off?
I don't think I ever realized I had such a strong love of the bugs. I think it was like I just was fascinated by animals, like how they move. Like, I mean, most children are, they love insects. Well, sorry, they like animals. But I think looking back now, it's a lot more like, I was never afraid to like hold a spider, never afraid to put a snake on the back of my shoulders. I had lots of creepy crawlies, and I had the stick insects, I suppose. What I realized is why I like pest management so much is when I started working in the lab with all these insects. It's just great with working with like a whole animal. A lot of science, or a lot of like jobs now, in science, you work with like this tiny little aspect of like the genome or the DNA. You work with things in agar plates. There's not much where you can work with a whole animal and study their behavior, their biology. I mean, pest management is great for that, because there's not many industries where you actually work with animals and learn about them for a job. The whole purpose of it is so you can actually control them a bit better because they are negatively affecting us in some way. But apart from like, working in a zoo or wildlife conservation, there's not many jobs where you can actually interact with animals and learn about them on a daily basis. And that's just what I love to do. I was fascinated by animals constantly. You always get to learn something new, which is great.
Absolutely. Oh, Sean, I hate to tell you, it looks as though you're launching into that, but you are muted.
Not now, am I?
Nope.
Right now. Yeah. So what would be the best memory you've got of working with insects? You're going to try and convince all these people out there that you aren't weird playing with insects. Tell us something that's really cool that you've done with insects.
So many. Just thinking of what did I do all those years? One of the good things was testing out whether you can get repellents for bed bugs. Some, to keep off the bed bugs off the bed, maybe off the mattress or your sheet, or to protect people from being bitten. I wouldn't say it's probably one of the funnest memories, but one of the things I did do at one point was test out whether these repellents would work if you had someone as the bait, i.e. myself. So I'd put my arm on this like treated material, low dose, like the approved doses, so it should be fine for human skin, and then release bed bugs into that area and see if like they would be put off by that repellent. And it's really, really hard to stop a bed bug once they find a food source. I've realized they did not care. They were quite happy to run across this surface at another test. They went, oh no, I'm going to avoid that. Definitely go as far away as possible. If you introduced your meal, they would just absolutely go for it no matter what.
Yeah. So you are now the second guest on this show technically the third person on this show, but the second guest on this show to publicly admit that they have freely allowed bed bugs to feed on them in the name of science.
Yeah.
So
I mean, that's the thing. You got to make sure it actually stops. How do you keep bed bugs alive? Well, you got to feed them. How do you feed them? You're the food. How do you stop them? You got to make sure that they don't come onto you when you're treating a surface. Yeah.
And I'd love to point out that this face right now, this look of horror, disgust, and fascination is exactly the same face that Sean had when we were speaking to Richard Naylor, and he said he slept in a room with bed bugs twice a week.
Love Richard. Yeah, I always buy bed bugs from him.
Yes, so do we.
Yeah.
I think everyone does.
Yeah.
I feel like I honestly feel like I am in an alternate universe when I am the only one who's sitting there thinking that letting bed bugs bite you is not normal.
It's fine.
Yeah, it's fine. What's the worst that can happen?
Yeah, they don't transmit diseases. You count them in, you count them out if you're doing it properly, so you're not going to take them home. Yeah, it'd be fine.
Sure.
I do get more of a reaction now, unfortunately. When I first started doing it, nothing, but now I do get. But you get sometimes with bed bugs, you get more of a reaction the more you do it over time. So unfortunately, my bed bug feeding days are limited, I think.
Yeah, to be fair, if that was me, I'd just be like with a bit of a red Sharpie, be like, "Oh no, it's getting bad. Someone else is going to have to do it now." So we go. So no, we spoke a little bit about, we've got a couple of minutes before we want to properly talk about flies. But I just want one last question, which is, we've spoken about your fascination with bugs. We spoke about how you've got into the industry, which was through Rentokil and then the entomology labs there. But of course, you're not with Rentokil anymore. Yeah. Of course, you're Pelsis. So yes, what is it that you do for? What is it that you do for Pelsis? Do we call them Pelsis? Do we call them Edilux? What's the correct nomenclature?
So we're going with Pelsis. So Pelsis, we do have the Edilux brand, which is more in France. We were Edilux for a little while. Now we're going back to Pelsis because it just makes a lot more sense when you look at like everything else that kind of falls underneath. So like network and AgriSense, etc. Pelsis. What I do now is training. So I do level 2 qualifications. I do rodenticides. I love the insect course, of course. any kind of like insect IDing. I do site visits as well for customers who might want to do that as part of a service. We do like FB visits for them. Technical, also like training, consultant in pests. That's what I do.
So when you do your FB visits, do you get unhappy when you don't find any flower beetles? Is it like you don't win?
There was a time where I looked at a glue ball and went, "Oh, look at this!" And the guy showing me around the site was absolutely horrified about what I found. So yeah, I still get excited by it, and I'm always looking for that next bug. Like, even if it's silverfish, it's like, "Oh, look at it!" Yeah.
Oh, see, I love silverfish. I don't consider silverfish to be a pest. Anything that looks like a little drop of mercury trying to run away from you, in my book, is the most adorable thing on the planet. Well, some people might argue puppies, but I think a little silverfish are quite cute at the same time. So how long have you been with Pelsis for then? Sorry.
No, I was going to say, silverfish is a weird one. Like, I don't really think of them as a big problem, but I know in the Nordics, huge problem, and they seem to be doing worse and worse every year. Like, and that's why we've got a cockroach bait to actually control silverfish now, because they're considered more of an issue. But yeah.
What is the issue, other than the fact that people just don't like the look of them?
I think destroying paper products, cereal products occasionally, it does come down to that more of that thing of if something's in your home, people don't want it in some cases. But you can kind of factor that in with like if they're destroying something like paper or cereals, you can maybe see them more of a reason to control them. Especially if you get like hundreds of them, I suppose.
I think that just look really cool, to be honest.
Yeah.
Like something off a sci-fi movie. But there we go. But as I was saying, so how long have you been with Pelsis now then?
It's coming up for 3 years now. Yeah. So myself and my colleague John Stewart, who's also the other trainer, I think we both joined us around the same sort of time, around 3 years ago, and it's been great. Like, it's been great going out, getting. So in the lab, I was kind of a little bit more removed. It's been great actually going out and meeting people, working with pest control more closely. So I've really enjoyed that aspect of it.
Oh, that's excellent. And yeah, it's having myself worked in labs for many years, it's nice when they let you out of the little dungeon, isn't it? You
see the world.
They've let me out to the shows. Like Frodo Baggins and Samwise Gamgee being like, off on an adventure.
Yeah.
There we go.
And it's amazing because you go, so I see stuff like in the field, and you go, we need a solution for that, but you would have never thought of that in the lab because you just wouldn't have seen it. Yeah.
You get so pigeonholed, don't you? As in, flies live in cages and cockroaches live in buckets, and that's it.
Yeah, and you can get 100 flies very easily to test against something, but they're a lot more controllable when in the lab. When they're anywhere in that kitchen or dishwasher area, it's like an exploratory. Get on your hands and knees, look into everything to find where everything is. Yeah.
Oh, absolutely. But no, I suppose we should probably spend a little bit of time now talking about why we actually invited you on, which was to talk about flies and fly killers and what we can do. And just before we start, I mean, Sean came on a fly count analysis course of mine last year. And for a man that doesn't like bugs, he would not shut up about it. You loved it, didn't you, Sean? You are.
I do. I find it very interesting where we are very much on the start of our journey into flies and fly catch analysis. So I found it quite interesting. And if I'm honest with you, that's what I would love to get from tonight. If someone was starting, say, like you're not doing a lot of it, what could I, or what could my lads, what could others be doing that will set them on a good path to getting to where they want to be at a later date when they need to be there, if that makes sense? What actionable steps could you give us, things to look at, things to do, things to consider? We're just walking around and we're starting to make mental notes of like that, so we are on the right direction.
So what would actually like doing the analysis, or like first placing your insect light trap in the environment?
Imagine you are starting with someone who has never seen a fly before. Never done any pest control, and you're stood walking around sites with them that don't need EFKs in, but you're trying to get them with that train of thought of where you were. So you're walking around like, what would you say to someone who was starting? How would you get us into that groove of getting excited about bugs?
So I love insect light traps or EFKs, whichever you prefer. I prefer insect light traps because it sounds more of a monitoring device. But EFK is absolutely fine. What I love about them is you can almost feel like this expert because you look at the board and you go, "Oh, there's a big blue thing there. That blue bottle, or there must have been a dead rodent somewhere, or they've had that door open very recently because there's a wasp coming in and landing on that glue board." They are like this window into what is going on site. Even recently, like found some fruit flies. Oh, what are they doing here? Or I better go look around them where they're preparing drinks. Oh, big fruit fly problem there. It helps you so much to find problems and fix them before they actually become an issue. Like before people start saying like, oh, I've noticed a real big issue with my fruit flies, drain flies, or these small flies. Don't know what they are, which is usually the case. But it helps you so much to like investigate and find these problems and solve them really early on.
Yeah, they're a fantastic early warning system, aren't they? And it acts as a bit of a sonar net as well. Because I always say to folks, one of the biggest problems you're going to have in pest management is if you come back there once a month and you're there for 2 hours once a month, that's about the equivalent of watching 20 minutes of Return of the Jedi and then me asking you what the whole plot of that film was, and you would be easily, well within your rights to tell me there was never an Ewok in Return of the Jedi. And yet devices like ILTs or EFKs or however you wish to label them, they give you that 24/7 monitor, don't they? They let you know exactly what's going on that entire, those 29 days and 22 hours that you weren't there.
Yeah, and I think we think of them more as like control devices, and yes, they no matter what, they help stop that fly that's got salmonella touching your sandwich or whatever food preparation. That's vital, but yeah, that we kind of underestimate how valuable they are about figuring out what's going on that site, and that's why I find them so useful. And whenever I can, even if I shouldn't do it, sometimes I will go up a ladder even and check that glue board because it is so vital and so useful, the information you can get from it.
So with that, I mean, there's so many glue ball, EFKs, ILTs out there on the market. I've got 2 questions, and I won't ask them simultaneously because then we'll forget what the second one was. But the first one, absolutely, is give us a bit of a run through for those who are looking to get into the game. What do you look for in a good unit? What should we be looking for in terms of, what's good, what's bad, what's worth the money, and what's definitely going to be bells and whistles that you don't necessarily need just to see if that's a fruit fly?
Yeah, so if I'm honest, I love a glue board one. I'd always go for a glue board fly killer wherever you can. You would want something that's like reasonable construction because it's going to be up on that wall for long times where it's going to be exposed to sunlight, potentially things in the environment. You want to make sure it lasts and it's got reasonable quality that's actually going to keep working five years later. You can tell usually normally the heavier ones are actually going to be the ones that last a bit longer, I'd say. In terms of light source, I know people do seem to prefer the fluorescent lamps. Really, it doesn't matter about how much the light you see coming from that fly killer. We can't see the ultraviolet light anyway. The more bright it is, just shows how much energy it's losing into actually producing the ultraviolet light. So LEDs, definitely the way forward, I think, in terms of they only really produce that ultraviolet light. And so you're getting this very specific, very high attraction of that UV light drawing the flies and other insects in, which is absolutely great. And, you always get that light attraction over 3 years instead of having to replace them every year, your fluorescent lamp. And we know, by the time it comes to December time, they're not really producing as much UV light as they were when they first got put in. Whereas LEDs, you get no dip in that. They're very consistent. So you're always getting this high attraction of flies. apart from that, I'd say there's lots of different designs. I certainly preference for like darker fly colours because you put them on a white wall. So you get like a lot of contrast. If you get a dark fly colour on a white wall, flies like contrast, so they do end up working a little bit better. I do quite like a black glue board, except for when I'm counting the flies, because then it becomes a bit of a nightmare to actually count them. But again, the more contrast, the better the fly colour. But usually that doesn't mean very easy to actually catch the flies, count the flies. Yeah.
Counting the flies can be, any field biologist listening and any field biologist, and I know that actually doing the fly counts and counting the flies can be a struggle, especially if you're doing it once a quarter. It's been a busy old quarter, yeah. But with that, I've actually seen, so I went and, there's a technical guy in Pelsis, John Fish. Is he still there?
He is, yeah.
Yes. He showed me around his lab years ago with Tom, when Tom was still, when Tom wasn't captaining the ship. He was still just in the technical team. And I don't know if you've still got it, but when I was there, you have just an entire room which is wall to wall with LEDs, where you were not LEDs, sorry, with fluorescent tubes and some of the newer LEDs, where you were measuring the dip in emittance over this. And you just walked into the room and you instantly were like, it was just a bank, one entire wall, where it must have had about 20 or 30 fluorescent tubes just plugged into one wall. Is that still there?
It is still there. They keep checking how much light comes out of them to make sure, this is actually, after 6 months, this is how much light comes out. After a year, 2 years, this is how much light you're actually getting out of that insect light trap or fly killer. Sorry. Yeah, we've still got that. And we've still got a room where we catch flies. We do testing there. We've got a room where we release flies and see how well those units do at catching the flies.
So with that, you say you've got some bulbs there that are more than a year old. Of course, we always recommend that you change the bulbs. Go on. How much UV are they putting out after 2 years, roughly?
I don't know the exact number, but I think it's like at least 60% of the original light. Like it really drops down very quickly for some of them, depending on the manufacturer of the lamp.
Yeah, I can imagine that with that, if you've got any other source of competing light at that point, it's just going to cease working, isn't it? So there we go. I mean, my second question was about LEDs because I have been
sorry.
Is it right? You kind of got ahead there. But I mean, I think one of the biggest things, and it'd be interesting to hear your views on this, one of the biggest drawbacks, in my opinion, of LEDs is twofold. Number one, as we mentioned before, it's very difficult to tell them on. So there's a consumer aspect to that, isn't it? When you install something in someone's shop or you install something in someone's facility and they're like,
is it working? Is it on?
Is it on?
Yeah.
Is it doing something? Are we winning? So there is sort of like the human aspect to not being able to see the light. And I fully appreciate the biological insect aspect of the wavelengths that are produced, but it is a big thing, especially when you are some instances you don't want to tell there's a light there at all, but other instances you want to sort of like, it's almost like a beacon. You want to prove that it's there all the time.
Yeah. I've had this like very recently, like early this month. I had that again in December. Like someone was like, "No, I don't like that one," and pointed out an LED version, and I was like, "Why? That was working better than that one over there." But they just couldn't get it into the head. But it's not shining as brightly. So I do think I'm on like a little bit of a flip side of this. Like we could do better education. But how well will that education, how well will that message be transferred to the person who's deciding which insect light trap to put up on the wall? Or, you can put lights that we can see into the LEDs. That's the great thing about LEDs. You can get a wavelength of light in any wavelength. So you could put a blue one in or a green one, and then people will be able to see it very easily and go, yeah, I can see it's on. So yeah,
that's potentially the way to go. But with all of these things, the more units you put in there, what's the actual term you use for the
coverage?
Coverage component.
Yeah, I don't like coverage as well. Sorry, because it fails to think about that space. So if you've got a lot of light, you're going to need more insect light traps. You can't just have one per meter squared, whatever we give us the estimate. What about if you've got racking in the way or machinery? That light's not going to go across.
come to that in just a second, because that's going to be my follow-on for the next one. So with LEDs, and I think almost all of the manufacturers out there, it's roughly about the same thing. It's something between like 112 to 117 degrees of emittance with an LED. Whereas with a fluorescent tube, it's 360. It emits forwards, backwards, upside down, all around. So with that, and the fact that you are letterboxing then your emittance, do you find that leads to any kind of issues, especially when you're working not necessarily in confined spaces, but in awkward angles where you're not necessarily beaming across an entire room, but maybe down a corridor or down a section of corridor?
I get your point. I think it probably does factor in slightly, but I don't think to the point where you're not going to get fly attraction still. You're still going to get this ultraviolet light that, whoa, we pick ultraviolet for a good reason. Flies are also attracted to green light, but because we have green light becoming part of like most light sources, when you put UV light into the environment, it's like a beacon to flies. They see it very clearly because there's not other sources of light there, as long as you don't have the door open or a window nearby. But I do get your point. I think no matter what you do, you get ones where you get the LEDs facing the back and then reflect the light back out of the unit. They work really well, like creating more of that glow. There's ones where you don't have like an opaque cover as well, trying to get more of that glow. But I mean, this is a shameless plug. I love the Infinity, the fly killer we produce, because the lights come straight out of the fly killer and there's nothing impeding the light source. Again, getting away around it in a different way.
For LEDs, especially, actually having those LEDs visible to the animal is a big thing. And I did a fair amount of LED research a couple of years back on different units, and by far and away the units that were less successful were the units that had a lot of grills and bits covering them, because in the fluorescent tubes, actually you wanted to cover the bulb up because you wanted the blue light, but you didn't necessarily want people looking through at the device. It was a cosmetic thing. But flip side of that is when you've got something that's shooting like this, if you cover them up, it's just going to rattle around on the inside. Yeah.
So I'm a big believer about people who manufacture. It's not true for all of them, but people who have taken the time to create new types of insect light traps that are around the light source, so around the LED, and figure out how do they work most effectively. I find those are the better insect light traps usually, rather than the ones where they go, right, we'll take out that fluorescent lamp and we'll just put in one that, like for like, we'll just put it in exactly the same spot. I find those don't work as well, I'd say. But yeah, I'll probably get in trouble now.
Oh, it's fine. You won't get in trouble. It says comments blowing up. No, they're not. Don't worry. So with that kind of brings me on to back to Sean's question just 2 minutes ago, which was talk us through the process. So you've told us UV is good for flies. Pick a robust version which has got good exposure to the to elements. But from that, where would you then go about actually placing your ILT unit to have the best effect?
I think number one, put it somewhere you can reach them. Like there's lots of different factors, but if you can reach it, you can check that glue board very easily. It's not going to get, I've seen it all the time where people stack stuff in front of the insect light trap and then you can't actually reach to get the glue board, or you have to go up a tall ladder. And as soon as that happens, there's a health and safety risk, or you don't check the glue board. So always try and put it in somewhere you can actually service it quite easily. Of course, that's not always the case, because people go, oh, well, there's a plug there. I'll go stick it in there because that saves me time and money and energy to actually reroute the power so we can put it in this perfect spot. But where you can, definitely put it in somewhere you can reach. And I can't wait for that, like these improvements in battery life we've been seeing over the past few years, like with cars and stuff like that. Can you imagine an insect light trap where you didn't have to plug it in? You could just put it wherever.
Literally about to say that. I was about to say LEDs are such a low power drain. I mean, that was one of the original selling points. Why aren't we seeing battery powered ones?
I think it just hasn't filtered down yet, but I think that will be the next thing, especially when we talk about like new technologies and like AI and having like automatic like messages of like reports of like you caught a rat or you got this many flies on the glue board. I think more and more we're going to need the battery life to be much better, so we can put these devices wherever, so that we can send these messages to say, yes, you got an insect or you got a rodent. But yeah, only amount of time, I'm hoping, and then we'll be able to put these devices wherever we want, which we've been trying to do for years anyway.
Like just a mobile light trap. That's novel. Be interesting to see. But the problem is if you've got a light trap which is not producing any visible light and running off a battery, what happens when it turns off?
Yeah, well, that's why good to put like maybe an LED that you see, or like some other kind of sensor saying, yes, I'm working. Because even there's a Tesco near me, and I go, oh, is that on? And I know it is on because I can see the little button saying yes, it's on, but it is quite hard to tell from some angles. Yeah.
Oh, there we go. So that's excellent. So what other bits of advice? So where things can see it, where you can get to it.
Yeah. Not near competing light. So yeah, windows, doors. Oh, I see them all the time near open doors, like loading doors, and I go, oh, why is it there? Like put it. You're making it harder job. Put it just around the corner where it's going to be in a much darker environment, and it's going to shine so much nicer in the environment, and the insects can be attracted into it. The problem with also putting them near a door that's frequently opened is like you're actually encourage the insects inside. You could be making your insect problem worse because you're drawing them in from the outside. The fly flies past, it goes, oh, that looks nice, and flies into the site. So yeah, that'd be great if you could put them somewhere away from the light source. Obviously don't put them on top of like food preparation areas. I still see it, even though we know, flies fall out of insect light traps occasionally, or you could encourage a fly over that sandwich to the fly killer. I still see them where food is being prepared, and it should be like the cleanest environment, but you still get flies there, especially if they're not like putting screens on the doors. You'll still get flies there.
Who doesn't want a little bit of fly shrapnel, in their egg mayo sandwich at the end of the day? It just adds a little bit of crunch to an otherwise fairly boring sandwich, doesn't it?
I mean, extra protein if you've got eggs.
Well, yeah, absolutely. Well, the eggs are mostly protein. I think we can do away with the extra protein.
Yeah,
maybe. So, Sean,
I would love to know, like, because obviously we don't do a lot of it. I'd love to know times or things that you've seen when getting it wrong has went wrong, so we know to look out for that sort of thing. And times when you've either seen like an innovative use or a really excellent use of them to get on top of problems that we are probably going to come across on a day-to-day basis, or maybe it's a one-off problem or something like that where you're like, this is the bad side, this is where you can take it, so we can start to open up our thought processes about them.
Yeah, great. Well, so bad example of a fly killer is like one that, on top of like a food preparation area, they were literally making meals to be pre-prepared and shipped off. And because it was right above where they were working, I couldn't even look at the fly killer because I would end up spitting flies straight into the food because it was so badly positioned. Even if I like managed to like get a ladder and reach far enough across, it just wouldn't have ended well. And again, I didn't know what was going on there at that point. They could have had a massive fly problem, or a massive fruit fly, massive drain fly problem, but I was unaware because I just couldn't get to the fly killer. So it does come back to like great placement, really makes your job a lot easier. Good examples. A lot of time I've come across stuff like people didn't realize they had a drain fly problem. And then you open up the fly killer. Oh, you don't have drain flies anywhere else in your site. They're here. Oh, there's a dirty drain in like right around the corner where the water's not flowing away properly. And that was great because before the client even realized they had a drain problem, you could actually solve that and say, look, you just clear it out. And then before you even knew there was going to be flies going everywhere else, you've got rid of it and you've solved it. So they can be really, really useful bits of
have you ever seen anybody take enforcement because of this? Like actually get into trouble because of lack of lack of EFKs or incorrectly positioned EFKs and stuff like that? Have you seen like that to get to that level? Is it just usually loss of contract or loss of customer
Not usually, because the thing is, pest technicians are more knowledgeable than the people at these sites. They are offering all that knowledge and expertise in pests. And occasionally you do get some really high spec sites where they go, right, they know their pest control really well. But usually the pest technician is bringing that knowledge and they're bringing that expertise. So I've never seen like someone lose a contract, but certainly there have been cases where I'm surprised, like they've still got a grid unit when, you know, they should have a glue board, especially because they're producing biscuits, or you know, and they could get flour beetles and biscuit beetles on their fly killer. So yeah, I say I've never seen anything go wrong, but you should definitely take the time and energy to use them like really well.
We've spoke a lot about education over the last few podcasts, and you certainly mentioned it there about educating the customer. How does a technician go about, without going down the pressure selling through fear type thing, how do we go about educating them to the benefits of fly killers, especially glue boards, without looking like pushy salespeople, like trying to sell them an expensive bit of kit?
Yeah, I mean, they are probably the more expensive parts of kit that we will be selling, I think. And also, yeah, you definitely don't want to put into that, you know, you need this because otherwise you're going to get salmonella. I mean, we know flies transmit diseases, but how likely is it someone to get ill? Depends on how much the flies touch the food. But I think them understanding how important it is when you're getting a good visualization of what's happening on the site, how, yeah, it's going to make your job better and they're going to get better service because they have this device. They're going to be able to know what's going on in much more detail. They're going to be able to solve the issues a lot easier and quicker. They're going to be able to meet good standards of hygiene a lot easier, a lot quicker as well. Yeah, I think it's so important that there's all these benefits, that they have this kind of knowledge around what is going on site that you can give them with this technology, and then they can also make sure they can implement things really well because you've got that kind of data behind it.
Have you seen reluctance from companies to accept this, or do you find it a relatively easy process to get them into, especially sort of, I'm thinking more along the lines of the bread and butter work for the small pest controller, the takeaways, the cafes, the all that sort of stuff. And if you've seen them come across this resistance, if there has, like how are you getting them around it? Because I'm trying to think about how we implement this within our business and the businesses around us who should have them, who don't, or maybe don't have the right one in place. Because we often turn up and it's like, don't worry, we've got that sorted, and they've got some Amazon EFK on the wall, and the EHO is absolutely happy with that.
Oh yeah, they don't mind. They don't know how bad it is if you've got a grid one. They're just like, oh, well, you got this tick box. It's like, yes, you got one, great. Yeah, so there's two things there. Sometimes people don't like the look of them, but you can get ones where they look more discreet. They look more like lamps. They don't shine like a fly killer, and especially with the LED technology nowadays, they don't look like a fly killer. And they're a lot nicer to put in like cafes, restaurants. So I think that's great, but there is a real issue or a reluctance for, you know, some companies where they've got a small space. They just need to have a one on the wall, and they don't seem to care if it's got a glue board in it or if it works that particularly well. They just want it on the wall to show that they've done it. To get around that, I mean, one of the things I think we've done recently is to produce an LED unit that is a little bit of a cheaper construction, so more affordable, still does a really good job, but one that will do a lot better job than one that you get on Amazon. But yeah, I think it's more about the educating and showing how important it is to get a relatively good one so that you can remove the flies from the environment very quickly.
Go on, Al, because I know you want to geek out over flies. It's not my bag, but I can see that he just loves it, doesn't he? The poor lad. He just loves flies, doesn't he?
I just love bugs. But yeah, I think it's, as you're saying before, that it's difficult to sell a ILT or the rest of it on, the what ifs and the maybes, but it's so much easier to sell it on. This is a preventative tool. Not only is it a preventative tool in the sense that it will suppress the number of flies coming onto site, but it will tell you so much about the animals on your site. You got fruit flies, you're going to be looking for some, decomposing vegetable matter. If you've got drain flies, start lifting manhole covers. If you're absolutely inundated with blue bottles, something's dead. And there's so much information you can generate from that. But also, and when we talk about information, and this is probably one of the biggest selling points and the biggest tools that you can get from your IoT, is data is king. You can use that data. You can sell that data. It's not just an interesting sort of like conversation to have with the client, and although it is a view into what might be happening on site, but you can take all that data, can't you? You can package it all together and you can present that as value added, and that is your, come on, fly trend analysis.
Fly trend. So I was waiting for Sean to jump in then.
I keep knocking myself on mute. I'm so if I take a little bit of time, it's just thing. I have got a question for you both actually. One of my lads has just done his level 2, and he came back and he said something to us, and I was like, "What a load of shit!" And I was sitting there thinking, actually, that's true. And I've said it to a number of pest controllers, and they all went with, "What a load of shit!" And then you could see them go, "Oh, that's fucking true, that." And he came back and he said, when I was on my level 2, they said to me, if it's a green bottle, you would be thinking about something dead outside, and if it was a blue bottle, you'd be thinking about something dead inside. And I was like, that's certainly not true. And then I was sitting there, I was thinking, actually, that's true. That is that true? Is it something that he's just said, and now I'm making a thing in my head and so other people? And if it is true, why is that true? Because they're both just finding dead stuff and laying eggs on it. And the blue bottle, you would think, with it being bigger, would be harder to get indoors than the green bottle. But when I was thinking about logic, I was thinking, I can't remember getting many green bottles inside. Get loads of blue bottles, but I can't remember the vice versa. So is that true or not?
Oh,
I have a theory, but I'd love to hear what Sophie's theory is first.
Yeah, I don't know. Once you said it, I was like, oh, yeah, no, I do notice that pattern. I wondered if maybe because blue bottles are bigger, they might have better flying capabilities, so they actually can get further into sight than a green bottle. Like, they can actually fly further from that opening of the door. But yeah, and certainly, like, when you get like a dead body, I know blue bottles can fly further to find that dead body than a green bottle. But I don't know. Do you have anything to add at it, Alex?
See, my thought with this is that blue bottles generally only aim for rotting and like meat that's already started the decomposition process, whereas green bottles are much more likely to go for fresher meat. So if you've got a body that's well entrenched inside the fabric of the building, by the time that odor penetrates to the outside, that body is going to be well on its natural decomposition route, and so may therefore be more attractive to blue bottles than it would be necessarily to green bottles, who would be looking for sources of fresher meat outside, and they'll be the first ones to the fresh meat before your Californidae and your Sarcophidae and your other blowflies, which are more attracted to well-gone carcasses. They tend to be the second ones to the pile. So that would be my thought to that, actually, is just simply proximity to fly paths.
And then I've got another question for you. See, I do pay attention to certain things. We know that these flies lay their stuff on dead things, but why is it that we find blow on things that aren't quite dead yet? So I've certainly seen hedgehogs with lots of blow on them when they're poorly. I've seen rats, rabbits, when they are on the verge of death, but are definitely not dead, are still respiring. And you see flies bunging up their nose, their mouth, etc. with blow. Like, is that blue bottles and green bottles, or is it something else? And if it's something else, what other flies would we be looking at that would be like laying eggs on live things?
So there's lots of different flies that take advantage and lay their eggs inside creatures. And I saw someone said about sheep, and I know exactly what you mean. I know some sheep that have a dip every so often to get rid of their fly problem that live in their backs, basically. And it happens every summer, no matter what, they get attacked by these flies. So they are a type of blowfly. I don't think they could be blue bottles, but usually they're flesh flies. So the great ones.
Lucilia sericata. They are the green bottle
green
fly.
ones.
Yeah. That's how fresh they like their meat, straight off.
Very fresh. Yeah.
Very fresh. But yeah, and so that's why that certain species of blowfly will prefer different grades of meat, and some of them are happy. But as soon as any body starts to decompose, and even when flesh starts to go necrotic, when it's still on the animal, which is when you're seeing these lesions with maggots in, as those proteins break down, you start to get some key aromatics occurring, and that's when you get the flies attracted to them. And they use flies in medical entomology.
They do.
I'll tell you
what is it if that creature isn't dead yet, what is it that's causing the attraction for them flies?
So you still get like that rottenness. You still get that smell being produced because you've got dead flesh. So even though the animal's not dead, you still get like rotting skin. You know, when you perfect with medical entomology, sometimes you get people with burns and like the skin or the flesh is actually decaying on the body. And when you put the maggots on, they'll only eat the dead flesh. They won't touch any of the living flesh. They'll leave that completely alone, which is great when you're treating people.
Yeah, that's called maggot therapy. So my mum used to be a nurse, and she used to bandage people up for maggot therapy. And it's usually things like the blue bottle flies, which are only interested in that. Oh, am I still here? Have I disappeared off?
No,
no. Oh God, okay. Sorry. The blue bottles are only interested in rotten flesh, so they put a whole load of blue bottle maggots onto the wound, and they will clean that wound and take away that necrotic flesh better than any surgeon ever will. But on the flip side of that, when something actually has died, it's forensic entomology, and some flies are capable of finding a dead body in less than 30 minutes of that body having expired, and in some species, considerably less. So by understanding the average temperature of the environment and the average temperature of the body and the size of the body, you can figure out when someone has died to a 1 hour window, simply by seeing the size and number of maggots living on it. I mean, how awesome and awful is that at the same time?
Yeah. It is amazing. Like, I do medical entomology and forensic entomology. Well, I think more forensic. I'd love to get more into, but unfortunately, there's not a lot of jobs in that world. You don't need many experts in there.
No, you do, yeah. But it takes nerds like us to fly the flag, absolutely, for that. And the thing is, what we're doing, what we're doing really, I've been chatting recently to someone who is a forensic scientist for no other reason than it's been interesting. But with that, the parallels between what we do and what forensic science do is actually quite intense, because whereas they're solving, they're solving a big whodunit, who killed Mr. Black in the living room. Actually, we're looking for a very small whodunit, but the processes involved in trying to find out is just the same. Not just the same, but
just out of interest, because this is how my brain works. Can I ask you a personal question, Sophie?
Yeah, sure. Go for it.
What if you are like banging into flies and stuff like that? What else do you do? Because surely this can't be like, or is it? Am I just getting it wrong? Is this like the driver of your life, or is it? Do you do something weird and wonderful like climb walls or race cars or like? What else do you do other than flies? Are you like, if I get you to a dinner party, are you just talking about flies eating dead things?
No, I try not to, especially if we're eating, to talk about flies and dead things. I think I mean, I will talk about it at length if asked.
We get started.
I try. I'm very aware that sometimes, like even a friend, I started talking about bed bugs, and they're like, "Oh my god, no, stop it!" They just couldn't stand it. So I might not always talk about it because I understand not everyone has a great affinity with pests. But I think maybe this is the weirdest thing, but probably the funnest thing, one of the funnest things to do. So if you like doing something, why not do it as a job, which is a great thing to do.
To be fair, that's exactly what I get, because people say to me, how do you do your job? And I think, like, if you don't get it, you don't get it. Do you know what I mean? Like, it's, so I do understand that. It's just, I guess I'm doing to you what my customers do to me. Do you like your job? How can you do your job? And I'm thinking, well, that's disgusting, but it takes all sorts to make the world go round, doesn't it? And I think you've been a great guest. Like,
sorry, my cat said hello then. I'll just put him on the floor.
yeah.
That was the weirdest sort of. I was not expecting that at all. And of course, all we saw was just orange barred tail. It looked like you were, and scene change and done. We've got a couple of minutes left, and I'm aware I've been mentioning fly trend analysis for a while. We've not actually mentioned what it is, and so come on, please tell us what fly trend analysis is and why it's so useful.
So, in summary, I think the easiest way to say is fly trend analysis is looking at your glue boards in each of the fly colours you get on a site and going, "Ooh, how many are there? And what type are there?" So, is it the blue bottles? Is it a house fly? Is it a small fly like a void fly, fruit fly, fungus gnat, etc., mosquito, wasp? What is there? Counting it all, putting it in a little spreadsheet is usually the easiest thing to do. So in this fly killer, number 1, in this area, I got this many wasps, this many mosquitoes, this many houseflies, this many green lacewings, if the door's been open. And then what you do that for all your little fly killers, and then you produce a lovely graph, usually, to show you easily, rather than looking at just a bunch of numbers, put in a bar chart and go, right, I've got lots and lots of drain flies here. I've got lots of house flies there. So clearly there's something going on here and we should investigate this more. And that is what you do at site. You look at them, you go, oh, you analyze the board. But afterwards, you take all that data and put it into a way that's easy for people to understand what is going on. And you can visually represent your data, your pest activity on site. And it's great to do that quarterly so that you can see every 3 months, we get a higher increase of flies in the summer. We do have a template for catch tray analysis. We have one ready. BPCA also have one. They're very similar, but yes, I can provide you with one. And ideally, every year, if you've done your catch tray analysis every quarter, you should, with good pest management, hopefully see a decline in your numbers of flies every year. Not like you always get more in the summer, but hopefully with good practice, better hygiene, better pest management, you do start to see lower numbers of flies occur.
Do you know what I would love to see? Use to team up and go through, like, take 4 fly boards, like one for the first quarter, one for the second quarter, third and fourth quarter, and go through a very quick fly catch analysis for that made up year, if that makes sense, and input the data, show the graphs and demonstrate it, because it's very difficult for someone like me who hasn't done it to visualize how you're doing it, why you're doing it, where you're doing it. And I think used to would be mint at that. I think it's been really, really good.
Are you wanting us to do that right now? Because I think that's a little out of.
No, I don't mean now. I mean, well, we should get Sophie back on, and you two should team up and do like a 4 or an 8 board, well, just a 4 board thing, isn't it? So you can quickly count them, show which squares you're picking, why you're picking, do the counting, drop it in, show them, and just you could do it on one and then go, there's first one, second one, third one, fourth one, and demonstrate exactly what it is with an understanding of what the auditor is going to be looking for.
So I'm going to jump in here, Sophie. So there's two things that people frequently get wrong with glue boards and when they do the counts, which is number one, they chronically underestimate how many flies are on that board because there'll be a lot on there. And number two, you don't take into account the fact that you actually it's not an even distribution of flies across the entire board, because of course the lights will attract them to certain locations rather than others. So the best thing to do by far is, if you are doing your fly counts or if you are looking at the data on that board, count the number of squares across and count the number of squares down and times that by yourself to figure out how many squares there are on that entire board. And say if there's 120, then pick 12 squares at random, not just through the middle, not just on one row, and not just from the top and bottom, literally as random as you can do it.
Listen, a lot of the lads like me are what we call visual learners, and you can say this as much as you want. Yeah, that's fucking brilliant, Al. That's pretty fantastic, yeah. But I could just be used to doing brilliant at that and then be like, this is what we do, this is how we do it. And then we'll get both sides of it. And I, from my personal point of view, and I might be speaking just for myself, I feel like that would give me the push to start thinking about it when we're taking glue boards out, because we don't have any sites really that want that properly at the minute. But to have an understanding of it and to use the templates and put it together would be a massive help, I think. A massive help.
So the other thing you can do is you can take a picture of that. If anyone's listening to this, you can take a picture of it and you can speak to a consultant. Or many of the distributors, including, I'm not going to speak for Pelsis, but you may be able to can you?
Yeah, we could do it if you wanted. Yeah. We could try. We could take you through it, like show you how we would do on do a little count for you. Yeah, it's better. It's a lot easier to have the physical board. I myself have done this I've done it myself so many times. You take pictures of the glue board, you come home, you go, how big is this board again? Like, what is that? You zoom in, you don't know what it is. So it's so much easier to have the physical board to actually count the flies. Figure out what it is, and then you can get your ID as well. A lot easier if it's something that's a bit strange.
Talking about insect IDs, insect wings are fascinating. This will be my last nerdy point of the night. But insect wings are a fingerprint to that species. So actually, by sending the boards in, it doesn't matter if that insect has been blown to smithereens and all that's left is one sad left wing. Yes, even if it's folded over on itself. So long as you can just see one wing, there's a huge resource out there where somebody has diligently gone around and drawn out the wing of every fly species on the planet. And the house flies that I would find in my house, the pattern of the wings, the veins on the wings are exactly the same patterns as the house flies you'll be finding in your house, Sean, or your house, Sophie, anyone listening to this, even if you're listening from abroad, it's the same anywhere in the world. So long as you've got that one wing, we can tell you what it is, hopefully.
Do you get parasites of flies?
Yeah, I don't know one off the top of my head, I suppose. But you will definitely get some kind of parasite that lives on a fly, because pretty much anything gets a parasite over so many years, millions of evolution. I don't know.
There'll almost certainly be a mite, won't there?
Oh yeah, there would be some kind of bacteria maybe as well that lives in the gut. Well, yeah. Well, you get BTI that destroys mosquitoes, which is a type of fly. There we go.
Yeah. So here's a question for you. What's the only other animal on the planet that feeds its young milk but isn't a mammal?
Don't check. I think I'd probably work this out.
An animal, not a mammal, that feeds its children milk.
Yeah. And it is topical to what we're talking about. Adam Edwards, it's not a hookworm. No. It's a species of fly.
Does it like regurgitate? And that's the milk?
It actually produces milk internally.
Oh.
Yeah.
What fly?
It's a tsetse fly.
Oh, the tsetse. Oh, they're very good because they get born like not as eggs, they get born as a larva. It's very strange. that like they get born as a larva rather than like a little egg.
They get born as a last instar larva, and as they pop out, they instantly then start to pupate. So yes, they give birth one at a time, and they'll gestate one little egg to larvae, but it produces milk on the inside. So there you go. Insects can produce milk too. Aren't we all so happy we knew this?
If you ever see a video of a tsetse fly give birth, it's one of the weirdest things, by the way, but it's as well worth a watch because it looks like basically like this massive larva is inside this fly, and it's like it loses half its body by the end. It's crazy.
I hate to admit it. It's almost made it interesting. Like even David Attenborough can't make insects interesting to me, and he's kind of done it a little bit. So I think he's achieved something because he was like my idol growing up, David Attenborough. And I watched every episode until he got the insects. And I was like, boring. But I found it very interesting tonight. And I'd definitely be interested in doing some of that fly catch analysis between you if I could. That would be awesome. Like to put it, just a very quick put it into practice, just to show what you are producing, how you are producing it, etc. Because we would probably start doing it on a couple of our sites that didn't need it just to get in the groove of it. I think we've certainly started thinking about it, and we're generating enough boards now to do it. We just don't need to, so we're not. So it'd probably be something we could sit down, but it would be like the blind leading the blind, me trying to initiate that on my own.
I'll tell you what, if Sophie, if you don't mind, what we can do is it'd be very difficult to do it on the podcast type format. Simply, we just don't have the flexibility. But if you have the time, we could always put on a webinar on Zoom, which is free for anyone to join. We'll just give a time and a date, and those who want to turn up can turn up, and we will just nerd out and we will go through a basic fly trend analysis. And then, of course, always with that, if you want to learn more, there we go. We'll come up against that. But if you want to learn more, Sophie's alluded to the fact she gives courses. So Pelsis will do insect courses. Other people will do courses as well. But with that, if you want to learn more, and the joy of that is you get CPD to boot. But Sean's just put up a question.
Get your CPD. Definitely. Get it in the beginning of the year as well. So you don't have to wait until October and go, oh my God, I've got to get all my points.
Yeah. So with that, we have the basis prompt codes for tonight. So anyone who's still listening, these are your basis prompt CPD points that you can have for tonight. But Sean, you put a question up just while that rolls around. What was the question that you were wanting to ask?
Somebody earlier on actually wrote this on Facebook, and I don't know why, but I think there's going to be a really clever answer to this. And it said, are flies clever? If they are, why do they bash up against windows trying to get out?
So they're trying to get back to the light, to the sunlight outside. So
yeah,
flies.
But like you can open a window next to it, can't you? And they still just go like donk, donk, donk.
Yeah. Okay.
Donk.
So what flies don't see what we see. When you look at what flies see, it's actually quite blurry, which is why I'm a big believer of contrast and putting like something dark on a white wall to make it more stand out to the fly. And if you see with them when they land on like a dark line or the edge of it. But they don't understand if you're opening the window, they don't get like, oh, well, that's the way out, because it's all a bit of a blur to them. But they do try and, no matter what, try and get the light above them because they've got little light receptors on the top of their head. So they kind of like to be parallel to the light outside. But when they get into a fly killer, they fly towards it and then like kind of, I think sometimes they like dip down and crash into the glue board slightly. But yeah. It's all a bit of a blur for them.
It's three little light sensors on the top of the head called ocelli, which are the only flying insects and fast-moving have them, because as Sophie said, their eyesight is pretty awful. So our eyes are what we refer to as encapsulated retinas, and we have a cornea and a lens on the front, which are able to deform by muscular action to allow us to. We actually, although we think we are seeing everything perfectly all the time, actually our eyes are shutter stopping back and forth to give the illusion of a field of depth. With insects, they don't have a deformable lens. They have a fixed lens. So instead of seeing one vision, which is basically at a range of depths, they are seeing multiple images which are at fixed depths. So it's basically like it would be good quality, bad quality, good quality, bad quality, all the way sort of like up. And the more, when you have a look at things like dragonflies, tens of thousands of these cells across their eyes, actually the gap between good and bad gets smaller and smaller and smaller. So they have a very good visual acuity. But then again, if you've got a fly right next to a window, it's not going to necessarily be able to perceive the edges of that window whilst it's sat in the middle of it. It's going to be sort of like in and out and in and out. So, and also, I mean, you ask if they're smart. They've got a brain about the size of a salt crystal. I mean, there's a limit.
Yeah. They're much more responding to just things in the environment as it happens, I always think. Yeah.
Like
Right.
me.
So,
Yeah.
come on,
Although I do know ants can count, which is a great thing. So ants can count the number of footsteps they take to go from a food source back to the nest, apparently. And
share the study because you must have seen that study.
yeah,
Yeah.
This is a crazy study. So what they did is they put little stilts on ants, and so what they did is the ants went when they were trying to go back to the nest from the food source, they overshot because they'd walked too far, because they counted the same number of steps but actually had moved further with each step. And they unfortunately did the opposite as well. They also took off a bit of the leg, so they made smaller steps, and then they never reached the nest because they counted the steps, went, where the hell is my home? And they hadn't
or they just stopped working because the feet were really sore.
No, they're determined. They'll get back to it. You know what ants are like, determined to do it, get food, support the nest. You know, they're very diligent.
Fantastic. So 3 questions. Have you enjoyed your time on the podcast?
Oh, it's been great. Yeah, if you ever want to have me back, I'll be well up for it.
Yeah, okay. Give us a shameless plug.
So what was that?
Shameless plug.
Oh, right. Here we go. I've been wanting to do this. So we've got this new thing called Pelsis Digital, and you should definitely Google it. So we talked a lot about fly killers, and we talked about fly trend analysis. And yes, counting those glue boards can be very time consuming. We've got something that will count the flies for you. We've managed to be able to put a camera in fly killers, and it takes a picture of the glue board, and it goes, you've got this many big flies and this many small flies, and it will tell you how many you've got. So you don't even have to go count all your flies on the glue board. It will produce that graph for you, which is amazing. What I like most about this, I mean, that's great, but it can alert you. If you get even one fly in one very high spec site where they don't want to have any single fly, it can tell you when that turns up. So you know there's an issue straight away. And don't worry, you won't get the notification in the middle of the night, but you can use that to help solve issues really easily and like get on top of fly problems before they become an issue. So yeah, please check out Pelsis Digital. It's a brand new AI tool for counting flies on glue boards. And I know there's other ones, but I mean, shameless plug, I really like ours. Of course I'll say that, but I will tell you when I don't like something as well. And like, I don't like coverage, but so I'm a big believer in Pelsis Digital.
Fair play.
That's good. Actually, I saw, sorry, Sean.
You know, I was just saying, I love how excited she gets over an app that comes by.
I saw it at Pest Tech, just gone by. John showed it to me at Pest Tech. And it's quite amazing because you can dial in on your phone, can't you?
Yeah.
You don't even have to be near it. You could be at home eating jam and crumpets, and you could press a button, and it basically dials into the phone, and it brings it up, and you can have a look anytime.
Yeah.
Do I need to pack new glue boards?
Yeah, I think the picture tells you like every 20 minutes it takes a new picture, but you can force it to take a picture whenever you want. But yeah, that's another great thing about it. If your glue board becomes full, it can actually notify you. You've reached full capacity of your glue board. They get out there and change it. We are working on species identification. It's so vital and we want it to make it work, but it's so difficult. And if you've got a biscuit beetle, how do you tell a computer that's a biscuit beetle, not a bit of dust or a bit of dirt? It's so difficult, but we want to make it happen.
Perfect.
Yeah.
And then the last one is, who would you give tell us who you would like to see on the podcast that you would sit and be enthralled by.
Oh, we talked about her earlier. Gemma Sutherland, I'd like to represent. I'd like to nominate. I'd love an update on the glue boards in Scotland, but yeah, she's great, and yeah, I'd love to listen to her.
I've got one more question for you. What do you think about Alex getting a knockback for being the chairman of crew?
Sorry, I missed that. My cat sat on my headphones and now it's plugged it out. Oh, try that again.
What do you think of Alex getting the knockback for being chairman of crew?
It's a shame. I think it would have been a well-deserved role for you. I think, yeah, it would have been great to have your kind of vision of pest control, but also like your thoughts and your like where you can see it going. I think that you would have added so much detail and
so
value to that role.
If it's not Alex, who would you pick?
I don't know. I'm not going to say anything, I'm afraid. I'm going to leave that blank. I'm not going to say.
The safer option by far. And I like the fact that Sean periodically unmuted me there, so I could not interject in any way, shape or form.
No, we're getting a rattle. I'm getting a rattle off y'all. I don't know why. And it's funny, just talking about the noise there, it went really bad at one point. I muted you once. I went through the three of us and muted it to see who it was. It was yours. And then when I came back on, it cleared it. So I don't know. If you don't know, Sophie, we're having a StreamYard has been phenomenal, except for the noise, hasn't it? Like the audio has been an absolute pig. So we've been trying to work out who it is. It hasn't been the same person every week. It's just been, and just as an aside, if anyone uses it, me and Hugh came on earlier in the week and it just threw us both out. It wouldn't let us speak. Went on to the support and then we managed to get it going again. And it feels like we are that far away from getting it right. But like I say, Al, after I muted you and then put you back in, it went crystal clear for ages, and then it just started again at the end. It was just starting to drop in again. I don't know. Maybe someone can tell us. I don't know whether that was just me getting that little echo or somebody else. But yeah, it was just starting to rattle and get a bit naughty. And I thought, oh, I've nearly got to the end here. That's why I was muting myself during the thing, because I was conscious that it might be me.
I did hear myself, unfortunately, a few times, and I don't like hearing that. Like, no one likes to hear themselves, but especially if I got a bit too passionate, I could hear it.
It's always the thing. I've done a couple of radio interviews before, and sometimes there's like a half-second delay, and there is absolutely no way that you can keep a train of thought when you can hear your own voice. Because it just, what's on it? But either way, Sophie, thank you ever so much for being on tonight. You've been an absolute star, and there's been, so many questions and a lot of love on the chat. So we will absolutely get you on again at some point. It'll be tremendous fun, and you can talk about maybe next time when we didn't talk about this, but you sit on a couple of committees with me, don't you? Work the academic working group for the BPCA and the professional standards. So maybe it'd be nice to talk about some of the work that the M&D community does to support. The trade associations and all of the other bits as well.
Yeah, great. Yeah, I'll definitely be up for that.
Lovely stuff. So there we go. Sean, do you want to roll the credits, or have you got something more to say?
I was just going to say, if you're going to do it with somebody else, like say me and Alex, and you and one other on a podcast, who would you pick to do it with you?
I don't like to call out people. Do you know what? I would love to get a couple of colleagues on as well. Like I work with Mark Wenman, I work with John Stewart. It's great to have a laugh with them. And again, they get very nerdy into the pests, which I just absolutely love. Also, from my old Renticle days, you could get Matt Green on. He would absolutely love talking about bugs for you. You wouldn't be able to stop him. He'd just continue to talk about bugs, which would be great.
We're going to have to put some thought in, Lex. I could see this being a really interesting one if we got maybe some of your interesting bugs on, some Sophie's interesting bugs on, and somebody else's interesting bugs. Like for a non-bug person, like them assassin bugs, I found them incredibly interesting. Well, like a mouth part that like touches the belly and stuff like that will bite you and shit. Like they are interesting. I just wouldn't want to keep one as a pet.
I'll send you some over for as a present, Sean. You can keep them in the office.
No.
Again, Sophie, thank you ever so much.
Star.
What was that, Sean?
I said thank you very much, Sophie. You've been a little star. You've been phenomenal, and you've nearly made us interested in flies.
Nearly. Oh, maybe next time. Maybe. Yeah. Well, thank you so much.
Yeah, it'll be gone by tomorrow morning. But thank you very much. It's been phenomenal.
Yeah,
Really
thank
helpful.
you so much. I've had a great time. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you very much, folks. Have a lovely evening. Alex, do you want to chuck the thing on? Go on.
Go on. So roll the credits, guys, and see you next week.
Thank you for listening to the Beauties and Beasties podcast.